All right, I'm going to give it about 15 more seconds, and then we are going to get started today. Okay, perfect. Our attendance has kind of dropped off. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you're able to join us today for our presentation on playful social emotional learning and how playful learning can actually support social emotional learning in early childhood education. We'll start with a little bit of housekeeping, and then we're going to dig right into content tonight because we have a lot to talk about. I see everybody saying hello in the chat box. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. In that chat box, you'll also see a chat from Hatch Webinars, my counterpart Kayla today, with some information about today's webinar. She'll also be posting some information about how to participate using that Q&A box, so look out for that. I want to introduce myself starting off. My name is Kylie Rymanowitz, and I'm the content manager for Hatch Early Learning. I develop content for all three of our products. So if you're familiar with our Ignite games or digital experiences, I help write those activities that get put into the app for kids to play. And I started my career in an early childhood classroom as a preschool teacher. I did that for a couple of years and then went back to grad school. And since then, I have been a parent educator. I've done professional development for early childhood professionals. I've developed curriculum. I've done lots of things. And I'm really excited to talk to you today about a few of my favorite things: play and social emotional learning. So this is really like all my favorite things kind of rolled into one. So let's start by talking about what we're going to talk about today. This is kind of our roadmap for today's presentation. We're going to start with a brief presentation about social emotional learning, what it is, what does it mean. Then we're going to talk about the value of playful learning, why playful learning is so important in early childhood education. Then we're going to walk you through how social emotional learning and playful learning are connected and how they work together. And then we'll finish the presentation by talking about how Ignite, our learning app, can support playful social emotional learning for young children. So let's start by talking about the benefits of social emotional learning. While as early childhood professionals, I know you all know the importance of social emotional learning. I want to start today's presentation by going over some basics just to make sure that we're starting with a shared language and a shared understanding, so we can set the scene for the rest of the presentation today. So I'm going to talk a lot about CASEL for the next few minutes. CASEL is C-A-S-E-L. It stands for the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. If you've never heard of them before, or if you haven't checked out their resources in a while, I really recommend you check out their website, casel.org. They have a ton of great information about social emotional learning, as well as some resources for schools and for educators. But CASEL has really identified 5 main competencies for social emotional learning. The first is self-awareness. So that's understanding your own emotions, your thoughts and values, and how they influence your behavior across different contexts. Then there's self-management. So being able to manage your emotions, your thoughts, and your behaviors in different situations so that you can achieve your goals, you can work through problems. Then we've got social awareness, so the ability to understand the perspectives of and empathize with others, including those from diverse backgrounds, cultures, and contexts. The fourth competency is relationship skills, so establishing and maintaining healthy and supportive relationships and figuring out how to navigate settings with diverse individuals as a group. And then the last competency area is responsible decision-making. So the ability to make caring and constructive choices about your own personal behavior and social interactions across diverse situations. And as a teacher, if you look at these 5 areas, I'm sure you immediately think to yourself, gosh, this is what I want my kids to do. And maybe you're also thinking, gosh, these are all the things my little kids struggle with, because these are skills we're not born with. We have to learn and have these skills nurtured for us so that we can function, and not just function, but thrive in the world around us and thrive in the relationships that we have with other people. So what does social emotional learning look like? This is just a snapshot of what it might look like. I could probably have 100 slides telling you what social emotional learning could look like, but I'm going to just pick out a few favorites here. It can look like taking other people's perspectives, showing empathy and compassion, thinking about our own prejudices and biases, identifying and managing our own emotions, having a growth mindset or setting personal goals, It can look like taking initiative, understanding and anticipating the consequences of our actions, identifying solutions for social problems. So, my buddy Frank and I both want to play with the same truck at the same time. Oh, wait, I have an idea. Maybe we could set a timer and take turns. Social emotional learning can also look like developing positive relationships, asking for help when you need it, standing up for yourself or standing up for other people. Again, if we look at these skills, we think, gosh, this is what I want my own children, but also the children that I'm caring for. These are the skills I want them to learn and practice. These are really foundational skills to be successful and to thrive in not just in school, but also in life. Castle's done a ton of research about social emotional learning, and as part of that research, they've conducted 2 really large-scale reviews of social emotional learning programs in schools. And they found that if a child participates in a social emotional learning program at school, they have the potential to experience different outcomes from a child who is at a school that doesn't have a social emotional learning program. So they found that if a social emotional learning program was implemented at a school, 27% more students would improve their academic performance by the end of the program, 57% would gain skills, 24% would have improved social behaviors and lower levels of distress, 23% have improved attitudes, 22% have fewer conduct problems or behavior problems. That's kind of huge, right? We can see data is showing through this research that if we have social emotional learning programs implemented in schools, that can lead to real life benefits for children, not just currently in the present moment, but also over a long span of time. So these benefits aren't just in the moment in that school year, but what they've also found through their research is that social emotional learning programs have long-term benefits. They have long-term effects for children. So they measured a positive correlation between strong social emotional assets and higher levels of well-being up to 18 years later. And they've also found that there's an effectiveness across different cultural contexts. So a social emotional learning program consistently used with different demographic groups, both outside the United States and within the United States. They've seen positive effects with children among those different and diverse groups of people. It can support positive development from children with diverse family backgrounds and geographic contexts. So social emotional learning is important. And when you ask educators what they think about social emotional learning, they say social emotional learning is critical post-pandemic. We know that the COVID-19 pandemic had significant impacts on the social skills of children, the emotional states of children, the stress that children experienced during that time. So teachers believe, in fact, 56% of educators surveyed said social emotional learning is critical post-pandemic. 82% of educators agree that a well-crafted, fully integrated social emotional learning approach makes an impact on outcomes for children. And they also believe that positive emotions are important for academic success. So just focusing on learning the skills to pass a standardized test isn't enough. We know that when children have an opportunity to practice and hone these social emotional learning skills, that improves their outcomes across the board, including those academic skills. Teachers also think that all of those 5 competencies we talked about a few moments ago are really important. In fact, when they were surveyed to ask how important each competency were, they're all rated like 99%, 98%, 97, 96. The lowest rating was 96%. So they think all 5 of those competencies are really important. And when you ask parents, they say the same thing. They say social emotional learning isn't emphasized enough. In 2018, 55% of parents felt teaching social emotional learning was really important. In 2021, that jumped up to 62% who thought it was really important. They think social emotional learning is more important since the beginning of the pandemic, and they think that it's particularly helpful for children who are doing online learning. So administrators, research, teachers, and parents agree that social emotional learning is really important and it's very critical for children. So we talked about social emotional learning. Let's switch gears for a moment and talk about the value of playful learning. We're going to talk specifically about what playful learning is, what it looks like, and get a better sense of how it might be connected to social emotional learning. So I'm going to start by asking you a question. What do a monkey, a rat, an octopus, and a human have in common? Oh, I forgot to bring up my pictures here. What do these 4 creatures have in common? Well, you might be surprised to learn that they all play. In fact, play is not a uniquely human phenomenon. Dogs, cats, bears, even birds seem to like play. Play develops social skills. It helps creatures, not just humans, but creatures, learn about their social worlds. And it can be a mechanism to help people and animals learn to live in social groups. Play is important. As an early childhood professional, you've definitely heard the phrase that's often attributed to Maria Montessori, play is the work of the child, right? I'm sure you've heard that. You probably said it to people. I know I have. For a long time, play has been recognized as a pivotal way that children learn. And child development theorists have tried to understand what play is and how important it is for children for a long time. Vygotsky posited that cognitive development and higher level functions were strengthened through play. Piaget believed that play is how children assimilate to the world. In more recent years, Stuart Brown posits that play is evolutionary and something that's done for its own sake. There's no end goal in sight. Garvey believed that play is pleasurable with no extrinsic goal and is related to cognitive and social functions that exist outside of play. And Smith and Pellegrini suggest that play involves positive affect and is separate from different exploration and games. You might have heard some contradictory statements there. We're still trying to figure out what play is, and this is just a sampling of what researchers are saying about play. There isn't one universally accepted definition of what play is or is not. But through the next part of this presentation, we're going to discuss 3 different kinds of play on a spectrum of playful learning. Before we do that, we're going to talk about some of the benefits of play. Intellectual development is definitely impacted by play experiences. When children play, they're building skills related to multiple domains of development: science, math, literacy, social studies. And they're also building concrete content knowledge and creative thinking skills. We know that they're focused on social development when they're playing. They have the opportunity to start making sense of relationships while they're playing. They practice skills like reading cues from other children. So I'm going on and on and on about Iron Man because I think he's the best superhero in the whole world. And the kid that I'm talking to walks away and starts playing something else, right? They're giving me a social cue that maybe they don't want to hear about Iron Man anymore. And I have the opportunity to start to learn to notice and recognize and respond to those cues like, oh, maybe he wants to talk about something else now. They have the opportunity to practice listening, taking someone else's perspective, which is a really hard skill for young children to learn and practice. They start to build friendships. They learn to share ideas and express themselves and compromise. And they start to practice collaboration. These are all critical social skills that help us be successful in all areas of life. So these are the skills we need to have successful personal relationships with friends, with partners. Oh, I knocked my keyboard. These are the skills we need to be able to work, right? I have to work with coworkers. I need to be able to make sure I can communicate and listen to their cues and collaborate with them. So these are really critical skills that are learned and practiced while children are playing. We also know that there's a lot of executive function development during play. Children learn and practice skills for self-regulation, like delaying gratification or waiting for that thing that they really want. They really want to turn with the basketball, but there's only one in the classroom, so they have to wait. They get to practice controlling their impulses. Maybe I really want to hit that friend who's got the basketball because I don't want to wait for my turn, but I have to learn to practice controlling that impulse. And they also have to practice managing their attention. Can I focus when we're doing a small group activity, but I really, really, really want to go play in the dress-up area? Self-regulation is also related to peer acceptance and positive self-worth, and they get to practice that when they're playing. And then there's physical development. Play provides lots of varying and diverse opportunities for children to develop muscle control, coordination, their reflexes, their strength, and understanding of their body's abilities and their limits. So no matter how children are playing, they're practicing some of that physical development. So playing outdoors might be practicing more gross motor skills, but if they're playing inside, right, they might be playing with smaller manipulatives and practice some of those fine motor skills too, but also those bigger skills like coordination. So we're going to talk about this spectrum of playful learning for the next bit of this presentation. And this spectrum includes 3 different types of play experiences: free play or self-directed play, guided play, and game play or playing games. 3 different variables kind of determine the degree to which an activity is considered playful learning. The first being the level of adult involvement. So if you look at this little spectrum here, for free play, there's going to be much less or lower adult involvement. Gameplay, there might be higher involvement. You might have a teacher who is supporting that play or working through the game. Or in guided play, you have an adult who's guiding the play to a degree. The second variable that determines the degree an activity is considered playful learning is how self-directed the learning is for the child. Again, if we go all the way to the left here, free play or self-directed play is completely child-directed. They're deciding what they're doing, they're deciding what's happening next, they're deciding how they're playing. Whereas in guided play or gameplay, an adult might be directing some of that or different types of play. And then the third variable that determines the degree an activity is considered playful learning is the presence of a learning goal. Again, in a free play or self-directed play situation, there isn't a learning goal, but for a gameplay, if I'm working on number recognition with my children and I'm pulling out a game so that we can roll a dice and see how many places a child needs to move forward, or they're looking at a board game that's got numbers written on it, we're looking at number recognition, I've got a learning goal in mind for that game. So that is going to be farther on the spectrum here. But all 3 of these types of play are considered playful learning. Towards the left of the spectrum, activities have more child agency, less adult involvement, and loosely defined or no learning goals. Farther to the right involves heavier adult involvement, but still includes children directing the activity. So if an adult were to direct an activity, we wouldn't call that a playful learning experience because it is adult directed. So let's kind of put this all together here so we can see it. This chart briefly describes, who initiates and directs play and whether the play has an explicit learning goal for each of these 3 types of playful learning that we're talking about today. So during that free play or self-directed play, it's child initiate, the child initiates the play, it's child directed, and there's no explicit learning goal. For guided play, this play is initiated by an adult, but it's child directed. We're not telling them what to do, what to think, what to say, and there is an explicit learning goal. And then in that gameplay situation, that's initiated by an adult, it's directed by the child, it's still child directed, and there is an explicit learning goal. So you can sort of see how these fit together here. And the most important part to remember is that none of these experiences are adult directed. They might be adult initiated, but again, if we're directing it, it's not considered a playful learning situation. Let's dig into each of these 3 a little bit more. Thinking about free play or self-directed play is exactly how it sounds. I guarantee you're all familiar with it. There's no planning, there's no adult direction. It's just an opportunity for children to be free to direct themselves, right? So let's think about some examples of free play scenarios for children. So anything that's pretend play. If you've got a dramatic play area in your classroom, if you've got prop boxes that you pull out. So, in my preschool, we had a mail carrier prop box. Our kids got super interested in our mail carrier one day. So we had a box with envelopes and some blue vests and a mailbox and writing utensils and paper and little boxes, and they could pretend to be mail carriers through our classroom. So outdoor imaginative play is also free play. Any time in your schedule where you have free time, where children are free to kind of do whatever they want to do, maybe you call it choice time. Any opportunity like that, that's going to be free play or self-directed playful learning. So again, initiated by the child and it's self-directed. The child is deciding what to do and how to do it. Then we've got guided play. So guided play involves a teacher or an adult focusing a child's play around a specific learning goal. It's important to note that during successful guided play, the adult does not take over the play activity or direct the play. Instead, the teacher's involved, but they're asking questions that guide the next level of child-directed exploration. So I'm asking questions that make them think about what they're doing, but I'm not telling them what to do or how to do it. There's no singular definition or implementation strategy for guided play. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. Teachers should be implementing guided play by individualizing the experience to meet the needs and the strengths of the children that they're working with. So the way that you do guided play with one child is probably going to look different from how you do it with a different child in your classroom, because they might need different things. And similarly, the way I do guided play with one child related to, let's see, a math might be different than how I do guided play related to literacy for the same child, because maybe they have different needs or different strengths in those different areas. So again, guided play, an adult structures the activity and it's based on a learning goal, but it's not being directed by the adult. And then we have gameplay. So during gameplay, an adult curates a learning experience by structuring the activity that's based on a specific learning goal. Importantly, during gameplay, children should still be allowed to direct their own experiences. So we're setting up the experience, but we're letting them work it out. So again, just like guided play, an adult is structuring the activity and it's based on a learning goal, but the adult is not directing the activity. So we talked about what playful learning is. Let's talk about what it looks like. While our understanding of playful learning is still evolving, right now, 3 overlapping indicators of playful learning have been identified: delight, choice, and wonder. These indicators have been identified, or these indicators represent the psychological states of children during play, as well as behaviors that we can observe while children are engaged in playful learning. So when all 3 of these indicators are at work, a child is most likely engaged in playful learning. On the next slide, we're going to dig into these in more detail here. Delight is going to feel like or look like enjoyment, excitement, satisfaction, inspiration, or belonging. This can look like children smiling, laughing, joking, being silly, singing, celebrating, anticipating, competing even maybe, or focusing their attention. Wonder is going to feel like or look like curiosity, novelty, surprise, engagement, fascination, or challenge. It's going to look like children improvising, learning from their mistakes, imagining, taking risks, trying new things, pretending, inventing, expressing excitement, creating, or exploring. And then we've got choice. So choice feels like empowerment, autonomy, ownership, and intrinsic motivation. So I'm motivated from inside, not because somebody told me I should be doing it. And this can look like children making and changing rules during play. That happens a lot when children are pretending, no, there's only one mom in this situation, or no, the baby can't do that because the dragon's outside. The rules might not make sense to us, but they make sense to them. It can also look like children having and sharing ideas, choosing collaborators and roles. You're going to be the grandma, and you're going to be the neighbor, and you're going to be the baby. It can look like setting goals, negotiating, choosing how long to play, being spontaneous, or even just moving around while they're playing. So that's what these 3 characteristics look like. And I'm going to go back to the last graphic here, because this is the area of playful learning right here, where choice, wonder, and delight intersect in the middle there. That's playful learning. So if you're wondering, if you're watching a child play and you're wondering if this is playful learning, come back to this chart and see if you're seeing all 3 of these things, that's a playful learning experience. That's what it looks like for children to be engaged in playful learning. So my next slide is actually a question for you, and you can respond in the question and answer box to this question. Why do you think children might not be having playful learning experiences in early childhood classrooms? What do you think might be preventing children from having some of these playful learning experiences? I'm going to wait a few moments as you're typing in your responses. Feel free to type those right into the Q&A box. All right. Sure, you're working on it here. I'll just repeat the question for you. Why might children not be having playful learning experiences in early childhood classes? Okay, we've got a response from Heather. Says too much adult direction. Yeah, I would totally agree. Brittany says the same thing, too much teacher involvement. And let's think about why that might be. It might be that the teacher has assessment goals they have to meet. Maybe I'm trying to get a child to show a skill or practice a skill that I need for their assessment, right? Great intentions, but might be preventing them from having that playful learning experience. Maybe it might be administrators not supporting the importance of playful learning, or maybe not understanding that. I would say that sometimes the same can be true for parents. I sometimes had parents come to my classroom and say, why aren't you doing worksheets with the kids? We've got workbooks at home that we do every night. And I have to explain, like, well, worksheets can be helpful sometimes, maybe for older children, but we know about the power of play and how it's so important. So it might be that there's not an understanding about the value of playful learning. Maria said something really important, not being able to have those moments available during the day. And Elizabeth said restrictive curriculums, or maybe they have to follow a curriculum someone else is saying too. Yeah, our days get really scheduled, and that's not necessarily because we want them to be that way, but we have assessments we have to do. We have like classroom chores that need to get done. Maybe you need to prep food or clean up from a meal, get kids ready for a nap. And on top of the curriculum they have to follow, you might not feel like you have time left in the schedule to do that, right? Yeah, too many boundaries on what they're learning or how they learn. Different programs have many expectations. The teachers feel pressure. I really appreciate you saying that, because it's a really tough situation as a teacher to be in, where what's best developmentally for kids, but also you've got other things that you need to meet, other standards that you need to meet. And sometimes it's really hard to balance all of those things. Wonderful. Thank you all so much for sharing those. So we've talked about social emotional learning. We talked about how research shows us that's so valuable, why it's so important. We've talked about playful learning, what that looks like, why that's so important for children. What are the characteristics of playful learning? Let's try to put these two things together. So what is playful social emotional learning? How do we combine the two of these concepts? So let's focus on a social emotional learning focused classroom for a minute. Castle has identified 3 components of a social emotional learning classroom. This is what it looks like to be an SEL classroom. It's a supportive classroom environment. So an environment with community building, belonging, and emotional safety. There is an integration of social emotional learning into the academic instruction. So through the activities that are focused on math and science and literacy and social studies, we're weaving social emotional learning into those experiences. And then we have explicit social emotional learning instruction. So this is opportunities to practice and cultivate social emotional learning activities. So not just weaving it into academic skills, but also having a specific time set aside during the day to practice a social emotional learning skill. That's what they're focused on. So these 3 things define a social emotional learning classroom. Let's talk about what a playful learning classroom looks like. In a playful learning classroom, experiences are seen as opportunities. So play experiences are occasions to be curious and creative. It's not just a thing we have to check off our list. I think back on a little girl I had in my preschool classroom named Mira. And Mira was a wanderer. And during free play time, or when we were outside, you could often find Mira just like wandering around the playground or the classroom. She'd sometimes talk to herself, then she'd go play with another child for a while, and then she'd come back and she'd wander some more. I could have said, gosh, Mira's not doing anything. She's not learning. She's not practicing any skills. But instead, we saw what Mira was doing as an opportunity. Mira was having a whole experience. It was just in her mind. She was so creative. She was so curious. And if we had seen that as her not experiencing the world around her, we could have tried to force her into doing activities so she could practice these skills. But if we see that as an opportunity, right, she's still growing and nurturing. It just looks a little different than what I expect maybe. So playful learning classrooms see experiences as opportunities. In those playful learning classrooms, teachers and learners experience both joy and agency. So children and adults have autonomy and decision-making or directing power. So in these classrooms, we see children and adults experiencing joy and being able to make some decisions and direct some experiences. If we have a classroom that is an adult dictating and deciding everything, that's not a playful learning classroom. So we need to see children experiencing some of that agency as well. And then playful learning classrooms also have child-directed learning. So even when an experience is adult initiated, right? Adults, we still have curriculums to follow. We have things standards we have to meet. So I might be initiating an activity, but in a playful learning classroom, children get to direct their own learning. So they get to decide how to play. They get to be involved in the moment, having the experience without an adult telling them exactly what they need to be doing or how they need to be doing it. So if we put all these things together, the characteristics of a social emotional focused classroom and a successful playful learning classroom, here's what we get. We get a supportive classroom and climate, integration of social emotional learning into academic instruction, explicit social emotional learning instruction, experiences as opportunities, teachers and learners experiencing joy and agency, and child-directed learning. You might look at this list and think, we already do most of these. And that's amazing. You might look at these and go, ooh, we're not maybe as great at that one, or that one's tricky because our schedule is really tight. But these are the things we're going to think about for the next part of our presentation, is the things that we would set as goals if you really want to have a playful social emotional learning classroom. So I have a little checklist that you can kind of use to assess learning activities to see if they align with playful social emotional learning. So you can ask yourself, does the activity include opportunities for choice, delight, and wonder? Can a child experience choice and delight and wonder, or are they likely to experience it during this activity? Does the activity include feelings of agency and joy for children and teachers? Is it going to be really fun? Do children get to make some decisions? We know, especially in early childhood, children love experiencing autonomy. They love feeling like they're in charge, like they get to make some decisions, like they have some control. So we need to make sure our learning activities, learning experiences have opportunities for that as well. And then asking, is it child-directed play and learning? Is the child getting to decide how to do it or what to do, even though I might be initiating the activity? And then you can ask, are there opportunities to learn and strengthen social emotional learning competencies during this experience? Can they practice some social emotional learning skills while we're playing this other activity? So let's do a little bit of practice together. We're going to go through 3 examples together that are going to let us think about those checklist of questions and maybe think creatively about how to alter or change activities to make them better aligned with playful social emotional learning. So our first example is, you're going to see it in this box over here, is a pattern worksheet. So it's a patterning activity for children to complete on their own at a table. And during the activity, the child is going to be asked to circle the shape that comes next in a pattern. So this first line is circled triangle, circled triangle. We would want them to circle the next triangle. So let's kind of go through this checklist together for this activity. You're welcome to respond in the chat or the Q&A box. During this activity, do you think there are a lot of opportunities to experience choice, delight, and wonder? What do you think about this activity? Do you think children would experience a lot of choice, delight, and wonder during this activity? Yeah, I'm seeing lots of no's. No, this is a sit and follow direction activity, right? There's not a lot of room for creativity. So do you think there are going to be feelings of agency and joy for a child during this activity? The child really doesn't get any sort of agency, any control over how to do it, right? We're telling them exactly how to complete this activity. So that's kind of a no. Is there child-directed play and learning? This is an adult planned activity, but because we're not really letting children decide how to play, it's pretty adult directed too. There's only one correct way to complete the activity. And then we ask ourselves, are there opportunities to learn and strengthen social emotional competencies? Well, I imagine children sitting individually at a table doing this activity, in which case they really wouldn't have a lot of opportunities to practice social emotional learning skills. They're not interacting with other children, they're not practicing social skills, so they might not have a lot of opportunities to practice social emotional learning. So this doesn't score very well on our checklist, but let's think about what we could do to make it better. So if we wanted to make this activity more social emotional, playful social emotional learning aligned, we could, instead of doing a worksheet, I'm never going to advocate for worksheets in preschool or early childhood classrooms, we could do concrete materials. So using bear counters or shapes. If we really want to focus on patterning, giving children concrete materials that can also be open-ended, gives them agency, it gives them opportunities for joy. They can direct the play. We can let children decide how and when they'll complete their patterns. So instead of making it, you have to sit down and do it right now, maybe we want to see if they can build a road from one stuffed animal to another, but the road has to be a pattern. So we're making it into a game, something that's fun and engaging. And making this a small group activity instead of an individual activity, or even doing it in pairs, gives children an opportunity to practice social emotional learning. So maybe we're going to argue over the type of pattern that we want to create, because I really want to use the big red bear counter, but you really want to use the small green bear counter. Conflict, as much as it's not fun for anybody, especially the teacher, is an amazing opportunity to practice social and emotional learning. So they have an opportunity to practice reading those cues and responding to people, identifying and managing their own emotions, right? So they're getting an opportunity to practice those social emotional learning skills. Okay, let's take a look at our next example here. So this is my lovely graphic. I am clearly not a graphic designer, but hopefully it gets the point across. This was, when I was in the classroom, my absolute favorite activity to do with my small group. So this is a measuring activity. During this activity, I'm going to get a big piece of butcher paper for each child, and I'm going to trace their outline with marker. So I'm going to have them lay down. I'm going to trace the outline of their body with the marker. And then I'm going to ask them how they could measure to see how tall they are. So in this activity, we're focused on non-standard units of measurement. So they could use a ruler or a yardstick, but we're going to focus on what other materials they could use to measure. So in this activity, children would get to go choose 2 materials from the classroom and measure their height on that piece of paper. So this child chose a dinosaur and a basketball, and they are 6 basketballs tall and 8 dinosaurs tall. During the activity, as a teacher, I'm going to ask questions like, do you think it will take more dinosaurs than basketballs to measure your whole body? Or what other way could you measure your body? Or how could you compare your height to your friend's height? So I'm going to ask probing questions during the activity. So now let's rate this activity using our checklist. Does this activity have opportunities for choice, delight, and wonder? What do you think about this one as compared to the patterning activity? I'm getting some yeses in the chat box. Yes, they get to choose whatever they want. They get to experiment. They get to do a little back and forth. Are there feelings of agency and joy? Yeah, they're getting to choose what they want. So the child in your classroom who is obsessed with dinosaurs and can name all of them with the correct Latin names, right? They're like, of course I'm going with a dinosaur. When I did this activity with little Jonathan in my classroom, who was really loved playing dress up, and he particularly loved this pair of purple cowboy boots we had in the dress up area, the pretend play area. He was going to measure his body in cowboy boots because that is the thing he loved in our classroom the most, right? That made him so happy. He felt like he was in control. Is there child-directed play and learning? Yeah, I'm initiating the activity. I have a learning goal in mind as the teacher, but yeah, absolutely. Children are directing how they're playing, right? And then are there opportunities to practice social and emotional learning? Absolutely. So children have the opportunity to interact with each other, share or trade materials, even experience some conflict. Again, conflict is not fun for us as a teacher, but it's an opportunity to practice really critical skills for social emotional learning. So this activity fares quite a bit better, but are there things that we could do to make this more aligned to playful social emotional learning? So we could give children a challenge and have children direct how they address it. So what can we do? How can we compare everybody's height to see who's the tallest in our small group? What do you think we could do? We could listen to their ideas. We could let them direct the next part of the play. Let them work on those conflict resolution skills. We can continue to ask really thoughtful or reflective questions that help children really think about what they're doing or reflect upon what they have done during the activity. Awesome. So we have one more example to go through together. And this is a pretend play activity. So this final example is astronaut pretend play. The teacher provides a prop box with space-themed and open-ended materials like stars, books about space, a poster of the solar system, and cardboard boxes. And children are free to play however they want. So let's go through the checklist for this activity. Do children have opportunities to experience choice, delight, and wonder? 100% yes. This is free play. Children are doing whatever they want. They're going to find choice, delight, and wonder, right? Are there feelings of agency and joy for children and teachers? Absolutely. Pretend play is like the best part of the day when you're a young kid. You get to do whatever you want. Is there child-directed play? It's completely child-directed, right? Children are deciding how they play, who they play with, how long they play, what they play. They're changing the rules as they like. And then, are there opportunities to learn and strengthen social emotional learning competencies? Again, 100% yes. When I taught, I can tell you, at least in my classroom, the hot spot in my classroom for social conflicts, always, every single day, was our dramatic play area. They love that part of the classroom. Ariani says yes. And that is like the spot, the physical space in my classroom where we had the most drama, the most conflict. And again, it's really frustrating as a teacher, but that's where they learn the skills. If we want to play house and we both want to be the dad, what do? How do we solve that problem? How do we work through it? So there are amazing opportunities to learn and strengthen social emotional competencies during free play, no matter what the theme is. So we have the same slide here. What can we do to make this aligned with playful social emotional learning? This is really already super aligned with playful social emotional learning, but we could add in some guided play, right? We could ask questions. We could reflect what children are doing. We could extend learning based on a specific learning goal or objective. So maybe if I see that kids in my classroom are super into space, they're pretend playing astronauts every day, when I need to do a small group activity that is focused on letter recognition, I could make that space theme. So I could put letters on stars and put them in the sensory table with sand and tell them they got to search for stars on the moon. So I can make a learning experience that is also focused on their interests and make that into a guided play experience that can also strengthen the skills that they need to work on. Yeah, learning with purpose in a fun way, Olga. I love that. Yes. Wonderful. Okay, so next up, I have another discussion question for you. We talked about playful social emotional learning, what that is, how we might be able to do that in our classrooms, and how we can adjust or kind of audit our activities to see if they're aligning with playful social emotional learning. So I want you to do some reflection for a moment here and think, what is one concrete way you will incorporate more playful social emotional learning in your classroom? Feel free to respond in that question and answer box or the chat box. I'll give you a few moments to think about that and type those in here before we wrap up with the last section of our presentation today. What is one concrete way you're going to try to incorporate more playful social emotional learning into your classroom? Or maybe your response is going to be like, I'm crushing it. I'm already really good at this. And that's perfectly okay too. All right, I'm going to give you about 20 more seconds, see if anybody's responding and typing in. I know sometimes there's a little delay in the amount of time it takes to type and submit, and that's perfectly okay. It's also okay if you don't have any thoughts on this one, in which case I'll just keep moving on if I don't see anything come in. Yeah, so maybe having more child-led and teacher-involved play. Having an activity to share ideas and examples when we're in circle time, it's a great idea. Adding more opportunities for open learning or culture learning. Great. Oh, Abir says also during center time, that's a great opportunity. So again, a center time experience is a great opportunity for guided play, right? It's sort of free play, but I'm also initiating it. I'm selecting the materials with a learning goal in mind, perhaps, but it's a great opportunity for guided play. And during outside play too, an amazing time to practice playful social emotional learning. Yeah, Elizabeth says we have 1 hour block of make-believe play in the morning and 1 hour of choice time in the afternoon. Fantastic opportunities for playful social emotional learning. And house area activities. I love that everyone's got a different name for it. Pretend play, dramatic play, house play, but it's all the same thing, and it is like the best part. It was my favorite. I loved doing pretend play with kids in my classroom. Yeah, I think it's already done, but always create more opportunities, and it's always welcome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Mabel. I really appreciate that. Because sometimes we might already be doing amazing things, but maybe we're not thinking about it. Maybe we're not thinking about how amazing it is or why we're doing it. And it's a good reminder to keep at the front of our brain that, like, yes, what I'm doing is really important. It matters. And it doesn't just matter now to have kids happy today in my classroom, but we can think about how playful learning and social emotional learning matter in the future too. So what you're doing now, even if it might seem small, has a big impact for children. Thank you so much all for everyone for sharing those and typing those in today. I'm going to kind of breeze through the last little section here so that we have some time for questions at the end if you'd like to submit any questions. But let's talk briefly about Ignite and playful social emotional learning. So Ignite is our digital learning app for children, and we incorporate some of these tenets of playful social emotional learning into our product as well. So social emotional learning is incorporated into our academic instruction when it's appropriate. So the example you see on the screen here is a literacy activity where children are practicing tracking text. You can see the one is highlighted here. And during this activity, we're focusing on the skill of tracking text, but you can see that as part of the story, we've got social emotional learning in here. So Zion is really sad because his favorite yellow coat gets ripped and he's crying. So we also have explicit social emotional learning instructions. So this is an example of a game where they're learning and practicing deep breathing techniques as a way to manage strong emotions. Ignite has an entire domain devoted to social emotional development with games that help children practice identifying emotions, responding to emotions, and solving social problems. We also see experiences as opportunities. So the digital experiences in Ignite are built to be opportunities to practice a wide variety of academic skills when children just see fun and engaging games, but really we've got these really important learning goals in mind. And Ignite is also built to be a supportive environment. So you'll see this game here. This is our core game. In this game, children are counting the different items, the different groups of items to determine which group has more. But let's say a child does this activity and they don't get them all right. They're still working on building this skill. Then we would take them to a guided practice experience. This is part of our supportive environment. So it's going to look really similar. But in this experience, we use the I do, we do, you do method to help guide children's learning. So you can see in this example, we've got our little pointer hand. So in this example, Gus Hoppins, our little bunny here, is guiding them through the first part. I'm showing you how to do it. I'm teaching you how to do it. So I can set you up to be able to do it by yourself so you can practice that skill. So we do have a supportive environment for children. Ignite is also set up, it's designed to help children experience connection and belonging, and agency and joy. Children get to personalize their experience in Ignite by choosing their own avatar. This is me, currently my current avatar in the game. I've always wanted to be a rainbow tie-dye dinosaur mermaid, and I get to live that fantasy in my Ignite avatar. But you can choose lots of different things. We also strive to make sure that Ignite mirrors and reflects the real lives and lived experiences of many different children. And then we also have child-directed learning. So Ignite is designed to help children experience a sense of autonomy and control. When children begin Ignite, they start in the treehouse here, and they get to choose the first game in their game set. So they get to decide which game they want to play or which game they want to play next. Wonderful. So I can see, as we're wrapping up today, let's think about where we've been. We talked about the benefits of social emotional learning, the value of playful learning. Then we combined those two things and talked about what a playful social emotional learning classroom looks like, how we can think about creating or maybe changing activities or learning experiences in our classrooms to make them more aligned with playful social emotional learning. And then we wrapped up by talking about how Ignite also practices some playful social emotional learning. So now is an opportunity for questions. If you have a question that you'd like answered, please go ahead and put that into the chat or the Q&A box. We'll hang on for a few minutes to answer those, and then we'll get ourselves wrapped up for the day. So I'm going to do the awkward pause here, waiting to see if anybody is typing. Give you a minute to do that, and then we'll start answering some questions, hopefully. Or maybe you don't have any questions. Maybe you're going to tell me I crushed it today, which is amazing, but probably you have questions, which is normal. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions come in. I'm going to move us forward just to do the wrap up here, but if you have questions still, please type them in. I'm not going to log off. Okay. So here are the references. They're going to be in the slides that are going to be sent to you after the presentation. Just want to make sure you have access to those. 2 sets of those. And then I want to put my contact information up here too. I do have some chats coming in. I'm so glad you've enjoyed the webinar. Thank you. So Elizabeth is saying Ignite is great, especially how the games transfer to teaching strategies, goal documentation. She loves it. That's so great. A great way for those who need individualization. Absolutely. Awesome. So I'm not seeing any questions. You'll see in that chat box from the Hatch webinars some information about how to download your certificate. Also some more information about Ignite and how to access webinar recordings, as well as an email if you have questions about any of our products at Hatch Early Learning. We'd be happy to get those answered for you. Awesome. So if you don't have any other questions, feel free to log off. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so glad to have you. Thank you for participating and being actively involved. It's been such a joy. And if you have any questions, I'll stay on for just another minute or so, but feel free to log off. Again, thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. Thanks, everyone. Meredith, I can see your hand is raised. If you have a question, feel free to type it into the chat box. Sometimes your hands get raised on accident, which is also totally fine. But feel free to type in a question if you do have one. Thanks, everyone. Pequin, yes, there will be more classes. We usually do one webinar a month. And if you'd like more information, Kayla, can you put our web address in the chat box so that they know where to look for future webinars, or maybe there's an email list?
Absolutely. I will put a link to our previous webinars, and we do send out emails before the webinars go live to give you guys a chance to sign up for them too.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to give you about 30 more seconds if anybody's got any questions before we kind of log out for the day. Yeah, and Kayla's just put that into the chat box. That's a link you can click to find some more information about webinars. Thank you for that, Kayla. All right. What a great class. Thanks everyone so much for joining us. Again, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your Thursday. Bye, everyone.